Good afternoon to all of you here in the William G. McGowan Theater, and those of you who are joining us on our YouTube channel, and a special welcome to our friends viewing us on C-SPAN. I'm David Ferriero, the Archivist of the United States, and it's a real treat to have you here in my house this afternoon. Today we have a guest author, a woman who made her history during 37 plus years in the United States Army, and who tells us about it in her new book, A Higher Standard, Leadership Strategies from America's First Female Four-Star General. The book draws on our guest's military experience to provide insights to large organizations of any kind so they can remain relevant and meet the challenges of the future. Before we begin with today's program, I'd like to tell you about two programs coming up soon in this theater. On Tuesday, May 5th at noon, our guest will be Robert Grenier, former CIA station chief in Islamabad, who will discuss his book, 88 Days to Kandahar, a CIA diary. In the book, Grenier describes the problems he faced as he directed the first Afghan war, the CIA's war in response to 9/11, and a book signing will follow that lecture. Thursday, May 7th at 7 p.m., we'll present Lincoln and the Jews, A History. Jonathan Sarna will discuss his new book, which for the first time tells the story of Abraham Lincoln's relationship with Jews in America. Lincoln befriended Jews from a young age, appointed Jews to public office, and had Jewish advisors and supporters during his two presidential campaigns. And a book signing will also follow that program. If you want to know more about these and all of our programs and exhibitions, pick up a copy of our monthly calendar of events. There are copies in the lobby as well as a sign-up sheet where you can receive it in physical mail or email. And another way to get more involved in the National Archives is to become a member of the Foundation for the National Archives. The Foundation supports all of our education and outreach activities, and there are also applications for membership in the lobby. Our guest today, General Ann Dunwoody, has scored a number of firsts. She is the first woman in U.S. military history to achieve the four-star rank. She was the first woman to command a battalion in the 82nd Airborne Division. She was Fort Bragg's first female general officer, and she was the first woman to command the Combined Armed Support Command. For the last 4 years of her active duty, Ann headed the U.S. Army Materiel Command. Now retired, she was in charge of the largest global logistics command in the Army, comprising 69,000 military and civilians located in all 50 states and more than 140 countries. She managed a budget of $60 billion. I'm jealous. And was responsible for oversight of approximately $70 billion in service contracts. Army Chief of Staff General Ray Odierno called Ann quite simply the best logistician the Army has ever had. Ann has passed on some of the strategy she used to earn this praise in her new book. Walter Isaacson, president and CEO of the Aspen Institute and author of The Innovators, has said that Ann's book shows that the general's commitment to and zeal for service haven't ended with her military retirement. And retired Army General Stanley McChrystal, author of My Share of the Task and Team of Teams, calls the book an inspirational guidebook for anyone trying to make their team or organization better. Please welcome Ann Dunwoody.
Well, good afternoon. Good afternoon. I want to start by saying thanks for the invitation to be here with you today. I know this great institution is such an integral part of our free society, a place where ideas and of every variety and expression, from historical documents from our founding fathers to my humble presentation today, find a home. In the military, I spent my share of my time in the city, albeit most of it, in that less impressive building on the other side of the river, known to all of us as the Pentagon. David, thank you for that kind introduction. If my mom was here, she would have believed every word of it. My brothers and sisters, on the other hand, would be wondering who the heck you're talking about. Now, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today to introduce my new book, The Higher Standard. over 2 years in the making, over 40 years of living. Now, I'm just curious to know, how many of you have written a book? How many of you are thinking of writing a book? These words are for you. For the ones that have completed a book, congratulations, because I now know how hard that is. But for those that are thinking about it, you might want to talk to those who have before you dig in. Because quite frankly, I never thought I was going to write a book. And when I was selected to promotion for general, writing a book almost seemed to be a foregone conclusion. Because everywhere I went, people said, when are you going to tell your story? When are you going to write your book? And over time, this reluctant author had to admit that I did have a unique vantage point and also had a great story to tell. But writing a book is no cakewalk. It's no easy task. It takes a serious commitment, a personal investment of time, your heart, and your soul. And without that personal investment, you may have a book. It's just a book. It might have your name on it, but it won't be yours. And shortly after I retired, I was approached by a very successful writer from Los Angeles who was very enthusiastic about telling my story and helped me write the book. And he'd helped one of my friends write his biography and his memoirs. And so when we talked, he was so enthusiastic and so excited about helping me tell my story. And as he described it to my husband and I, it would take about 80 hours, 100 hours of interviews. And then he'd tape those interviews, and that would be our source document. And from there, he'd create chapters and then a proposal. And once the proposal was completed, we'd do the editing and send it out to prospective literary agents, select an agent, and ultimately, maybe I should say hopefully, sell the book to a publisher. Well, after that, he said, writing the book, that'd be relatively easy, and we'd be done in no time. And since I really didn't want to write a book, and he really did want to tell my story, I fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. And you want to guess how that story ends? Well, the first draft and the outline comes in, and it was a proposal of a version of my life seen through someone else's eyes, someone else's voice, and I barely recognized myself as the main character. We tried again, different approach, same result. And so the calendar pages kept turning, deadlines approached, and I never thought we were any closer to writing a book. So my husband and I finally decided that there would be no book unless we wrote it. So we set out on our own personal journey, joining hands with a different writer and a different editor, Tomago Collins, to produce this book. A book in our own words, recounting our own experiences, and drawing our own conclusions. But I didn't want to write a biography or a memoir per se, because this book really isn't about me. The story I wanted to share was about leadership. And today I want to talk a little bit about my journey and share some of the few leadership strategies that I believe contributed in some measure to my success and spurred organizational change and improvement. And I want to share those experiences, obviously truncated from the book, that helped define those leadership lessons. And in the book, I tried to choose leadership lessons that were not only fundamental to my success, but had the broadest application to larger organizations, large, small, battlefields or boardrooms, lessons for leaders who never wanted to stop learning. In a higher standard, I tried to capture what I learned, how I learned it, and how these things made me a better leader. Now, this is not a book on how to become a general. I'm not sure I could write that book. Nor is it a book on the 10 steps to being a good leader. Because I don't think there's any magic recipe for leadership. If there were, everyone would buy the recipe and that would be it. What I try to do is share the leadership strategies supported by stories in my life that work for me, with hopes that the others might find them useful in their lives and in their careers. It's based on things I learned as a kid, as an athlete, as a sibling, as a daughter, as a wife, as a soldier, as a business person, and as a leader. And my hope is that my remarks and this book will challenge people to dream big and find ways to make a difference, even in the spite of obstacles, imperfect bosses, or traditions that have outlived their usefulness. Now, I chose a higher standard as a title because less than 1% of the American population will ever serve in the military. And I think most citizens don't realize that men and women in uniform are held to a higher standard. In our profession, we take an oath to support and defend the Constitution. We're held to a strict code of conduct that governs our behavior in and out of uniform. And we have to meet certain standards in just about everything we do. And these standards range anywhere from adherence to stringent codes of ethic, adherence to the Uniform Code of Military Justice, respect for authority and the chain of command, to how fast you run, how many push-ups you can do, and how you wear your uniform, including your hair, and how many times you can hit a target with a variety of weapons. But most importantly, the reason I chose a higher standard is because the good leaders that I served with held themselves to higher standards. When I joined the Army, I just assumed that I was going to have to prove myself and exceed the standards to be accepted, and I strove to do just that. But what I realized during my journey is that all the good leaders I served with held themselves to a higher standard, and they consistently applied leadership principles meant to improve, not degrade or debase. In the Army, we call it leading from the front. In the book, I spend some time talking about the difference between leaders and soldiers who just met the standards and those who always tried to exceed the standards. And it's kind of like the difference between being an A student and a C student. Except in the Army, lives depend on our performance and our leadership. The leader who's satisfied with just meeting the standard, never striving to a higher standard, will probably never lead a high-performing organization. Now, when I joined the Army back in 1975, I joined the Women's Army Corps. It was kind of like a separate branch for women who desired to serve. And to be honest, I never dreamed about joining the Army. I always knew from the time I was at elementary school that I was going to be a coach and a physical education teacher. As a kid, I was a tomboy. I don't even know if they use that word anymore. But I loved sports, and I went to one of the top physical education colleges in the country, Cortland, in upstate New York. Now, during my junior year in college, the Army offered high-potential women $500 a month during their senior year in return for a 2-year commitment and a commission as a second lieutenant. Well, $500 was a lot of money back then. And even with 4 generations of West Pointers in my family, the thought of joining the Army had never crossed my mind. But it was an offer I couldn't refuse. So I joined and began my 2-year journey in the Army, a 2-year journey that turned into 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, and yes, 38 years. So when people ask me if I want to be a general, I tell them, not in my wildest dreams. When it happened, there was no one more surprised than I was. Except, of course, my husband. And now you know why they say, behind every successful woman, there's an astonished man. In 2008, when the President of the United States nominated me for my 4th star, I was not prepared for the enormity of the event. It was a first, but I'd been blessed with a lot of firsts in my life. But being nominated for a 4-star general was a different kind of first. And I didn't appreciate the significance of the promotion until the tidal wave of cards and letters and emails started coming my way. I heard from moms and dads who saw this promotion as a beacon of hope for their own daughters, an affirmation that in America, anything is possible with hard work and commitment. And when I was nominated, I heard from women veterans of all wars, many who just wanted to say congratulations, some just want to say thanks, and still others just wanted to say how happy they were this day had finally arrived. It was a humbling experience, to say the least. When the promotion ceremony finally happened, I said, I might be the first, but I certainly won't be the last. And today, I'm happy to report there are 3 other female 4-star officers, 2 in the Air Force and 1 in the Navy, with more in the making. But this is not just about more promotions. What's really exciting is women are flying jet fighters in combat, women are commanding ships in the Navy, and now the first group of women, highly qualified women, are starting Ranger School. As readers will see in my book, the leadership journey begins with an introduction by Sheryl Sandberg, Chief Operating Officer of Facebook. She's author of the national bestseller Lean In and a true champion of women's equality. Now, you might think that we sound a bit like the Odd Couple, 2 people from entirely different worlds. Sheryl, a West Coast, high-tech, social media superstar, and me, East Coast, low-tech, muddy boots soldier. The reality is that we had more, that the things we had in common way outweighed anything we didn't. And the principal thing among those things we had in common was the desire to make a difference in organizations and the lives of people. And I'm glad to call her my friend and kindred spirit. Sheryl Sandberg has championed several national campaigns, from getting women to achieve greater positions in the workplace and getting men to recognize to support these talented women. And I've been in support of both campaigns. And I've been fortunate that I have such a supportive husband who's a hero in his own right, with 26 years in the Air Force as a combat controller. He's been a linchpin in my journey. I can assure you it's a lot easier to lean in when you have someone to lean on. On my toughest days, my husband was right there, kind of like a coach in the corner of a boxing ring. He would pick me up, dust me off, push me back in the ring, and say, go give him hell. And when Craig's mother finished reading the book, A Higher Standard, she told Craig, I get the impression that Ann really likes you. Now, the number one question I always get is, why you? Why were you the first female to attain the rank of 4-star general? And the second question I get is, how did you succeed in this male-dominated profession? How did you manage to claw your way to the top in this man's army? And I try to answer both of these questions in the book, and I think most of you would be surprised by the answers. My journey to the top was far more interesting than a career of struggling and fighting my way through the ranks. It would have been easy, and probably expected by some, that I would write a book on how I, like Wonder Woman, kicked my way to the top, shattered glass ceilings, and broke down doors. But the reality is, my journey was more about leadership than gender. Not just leadership for people in the Army, not just leadership for women, but leadership for people, period. I didn't just skip along the yellow brick road in the land of Oz and find myself at the end of the journey, the end of the rainbow, as a four-star general. There are bumps in the road, there are obstacles in the road, but there are people all along the road that wanted to help. And many of these were men. But I think these bumps, these obstacles, and these people that are willing to help can be found in all walks of life and in any profession. Now, like many of you, my leadership skills initially came from my family, my education, and from fitness. When I say fitness, I mean mental fitness, physical fitness, emotional fitness, and spiritual fitness. These formed the foundation that allowed me to achieve things I never thought possible. I came from a values-based family. I had the best mom and dad a kid could ever ask for. In fact, I know much of who I am today is based on what I learned from them. My dad, proud soldier, father, patriot, who served this country for 31 years and fought in 3 wars. We just celebrated his 96th birthday. Mom is the unsung hero in our family. She pretty much raised 6 kids on her own while Dad was serving our country. Mom was a devout Catholic. She was the most selfless, gracious, and caring person I ever knew. She taught me the glass was always going to be half full, never half empty, and no matter what the weather forecast, she said, it's never going to rain on our parade. My participation in sports was character building, to say the least. I competed in both tennis and gymnastics in college, and I learned as much from losing as I did from winning. And I learned that team performance was far more important than individual performance. And I learned that performing in front of large crowds can be scary and intimidating. But competing in sports taught me priceless lessons and how to turn surprises into experiences and challenges into opportunities. And my education gave me the intellectual skills and to be technically competent and credible. A bachelor's degree and 2 master's degrees only sharpened my creative and my strategic thinking skills. Family, fitness, and education, the cornerstones of who I am. In the book, I tried to be as honest and candid about the challenges I faced, as well as the opportunities I was given. I tried to put a human face on leadership. I remember back in the 80s, or I think in 1984, I was stationed in Germany, and I had just been selected to command a parachute rigger detachment. I was a young captain, and this was my dream job. But since the primary function of a parachute detachment was to pack parachutes and rig loads of supplies and equipment for airdrop, one of the requirements of the commander was to be certified jump master. Now, a jump master is the person who's responsible to check equipment, check parachutes, and make sure that there are no malfunctions during a drop. Well, at the time, I only had 12 parachute jumps, and I'm not sure if there were any female jump masters in the Army at the time or not. But my boss said, hey, you're the best qualified, and as long as I passed jump master school, the job was mine. Well, as it turned out, the only place to go to jump master school in Europe was with special forces in Bad Tölz, Germany. When I received my orders, I was so excited. Bad Tölz is a beautiful town in Bavaria in southern Germany. It's south of Munich, surrounded by the mountains, and I was going to get to go to jump master school. Bad Tölz used to be the fortress that was built in World War II time frame and was the training center for Hitler's SS officer corps, the most trusted and ruthless of the Third Reich. But in 1984, it was the American headquarters for the 1st Battalion, 10th Special Forces Group. And I showed up on a Sunday afternoon, ready for training on Monday morning. And when I reported in, I handed my orders to the duty officer. He looked at me He looked at my orders. He looked back at me. Then he handed me a room key and pointed me down the hallway. Never said a word. Off I went to find my room. When I found it and opened the door, there's this young male paratrooper lying on the other bunk. Now, he looked at me, I looked at him, we looked back at each other, and we're both stunned. In those days, it was always two to a room, but it was not co-ed. It's still not co-ed. So I marched back down the office, and there were several sergeants and other captains now in anxious conversation. And they said, "We thought your orders had a typo. We were expecting Andy Dunwoody." Well, no one was smiling. No one was laughing. It was like, what are we going to do about her? Well, as you can imagine, that wasn't the only time something like that happened in my career. But I did get my own room. I did attend the training. And I'm also happy to report that I graduated from the course, something only 40% of the Jumpmaster students do on the first try. Now, in my book, I talk about my very first platoon sergeant, who taught me a lot of things. But one of the most enduring things he taught me was to never walk by a mistake. He said, if you walk by a mistake, you just set a new, lower standard. A mistake could be something as simple as picking up a piece of paper or trash off the ground instead of just walking by or picking it up. Or it could be something serious as failing to properly clean and maintain your combat equipment. Now, in the Army, failing to enforce the standards can be a slippery slope that leads to poor performance and people getting hurt. The same principle can be found in the civilian life. Think about it. If the people at General Motors hadn't turned the other way when they discovered the defective ignition switch in their cars, they may have saved billions of dollars for the investors and possibly saved the lives of those who were crashes caused by the faulty ignitions. If the Veterans Administration's employees and leadership had highlighted the patient backlog versus trying to cover it up, they may have been able to help more veterans, not delay or prevent the care they needed. Now, never walking by a mistake briefs well, and it's easy to say, but it's hard to do. It takes courage, it takes resolve, and it takes consistency. Those who doggedly refuse to walk by a mistake are sometimes thought as grumpy or inflexible, but the principle can help everyone, because if something is worth doing, it's worth doing right. Another principle I learned early on is that big dreams can come true with hard work and commitment. You can be anything you want. Now, I know I said I always wanted to be a phys ed teacher and a coach. And while I really didn't realize it at first, that's exactly what I ended up doing. I just ended up doing it in a different classroom. I ended up teaching and coaching soldiers in a very physically demanding environment on and off the battlefield. Now, many folks are surprised when I tell them I never worked for a woman. I worked for men that either believed in me or didn't. Male leaders who saw something in me and gave me opportunities that, if left to the institution, may have never happened. That said, I've had many women role models, one of them sitting right in the front row here, General Vaught, and mentors along the way, women who were pioneers in their own right, women I looked up to. When I was growing up, my mom and my coaches were at the top of the list. Now, as you can imagine, I've witnessed a lot of change during the last 4 decades. It's hard for millennials to even fathom the 1970s reality of an all-women's Army Corps, an all-male West Point, or ROTC programs that excluded women. I witnessed the disestablishment of the WAC and the integration of women into the regular Army. It truly helped facilitate the major diversification of our ranks, but policy change alone didn't necessarily mean immediately change of mindset. 20 years ago, I had the opportunity to accompany the Chief of Staff of the Army, General Reimer, to our Communications and Electronic Command in New Jersey. That was a very high-tech command, as you can imagine, mostly scientists, engineers, and communication experts. I was Lieutenant Colonel back then and was there to take notes for the General's trip report. We walked into the conference room, and I couldn't help but notice that everyone sitting around the table was a white male. The only women in the room, beside myself, were serving coffee or refreshments. I thought, what's wrong with this picture? Last year, Sheryl Sandberg gathered over 1,500 women from her company for a leadership conference. Imagine 1,500 women from Facebook offices around the country and the world. And I had the privilege of talking to this group about leadership. And I couldn't help but think about the room with 0 women in the engineering business back in 1995 to an auditorium filled with women who are writing software programs, developing engineering applications in this new and exciting business. It gave me goosebumps, actually. But then I recently read a newspaper article that reported that talented, well-educated women in high technology careers were deciding to leave because of a hostile work environment. Their male counterparts didn't think they belonged. As you can imagine, my journey wasn't without similar confrontation. Not everyone was glad to see Ann Dunwoody when I showed up and reported airborne school back in Fort Benning, Georgia, home of the infantry in 1976, as one of the first females to go to airborne school, or when I reported into the 82nd Airborne Division in 1988 as the first female field grade officer. It was usually the same old, what on earth are you going to do with this? What are you going to do with this woman? But I believed by staying on the moral high ground, by not lowering my own standards or stooping to counterproductive tactics like name-calling, gossip, or innuendos, that I would prevail. And I truly believe, whether you're male or female, that if we let others unduly influence or make decisions for us, they win. If we let others drive us away from our passion or something that we believe in, they win. Were there times when it would have been easy to run, face of adversity? You bet. But at the end of the day, I'd ask myself the question, if I quit, if I take the easy road and don't continue to try and make a difference, who's the real winner and who's the real loser? And for me, the seemingly unsurmountable challenges turned into opportunities, and at the end of the day, it was all about leadership. While juicy gossip stories and throwing people under the bus makes for good reading and sells a lot of books, I tried to do neither. I tried to give credit to those who served as role models for me, and I tried to describe leadership styles that were effective, as well as those that no one would want to emulate. The truth is, we learn from both good and bad leaders. When I was serving as the commander of Army Materiel Command, I had the opportunity to meet Muhtar Kent, the president and CEO of Coca-Cola. And he invited me to talk to his workforce. I was surprised how much his organization and mine had in common. We both had over 60,000 employees. We both had organizational footprints in 140 countries, and we're both in the distribution business. The main difference between our missions was that the good people of Coca-Cola weren't normally operating under threat of getting ambushed, shot at, or blown up while they're distributing their product. But we faced the similar leadership challenges. How do you diversify your workforce? Not just in race and gender, but diversity of thought. How do you build the bench and develop future leaders? How do you create a positive working climate, one where everyone gets a fair chance? How do you execute succession planning? Or how do you create a vision for the organization and its future? I talk about all of these leadership strategies because I think these are the kind of things that contributed to my own success. When I became the commander of Army Material Command, I remember thinking, if all 69,000 employees came to work every day, clearly understanding how important he or she was to the accomplishment of the mission, and if I could reach out and get the next generation of leaders to believe they could be anything they want with hard work and commitment, what a powerful thing that would be. Creating a strategic vision, one that empowered people, made them feel important, made them feel good about themselves and their role in the organization, allowed me to do just that. And by the time I left command, I believe there wasn't anything my employees didn't think they could do. As I said, during my nearly 4 decades in the service, I witnessed a lot of change and a lot of doors opening. But the conversation shouldn't stop there, because there will always be more to be done. You'll see in this book, if not from my remarks today, I loved being a soldier, and I loved leading soldiers. I never sought to be the first female anything. I sought to serve my nation and the Army the best way I could. I always wanted to be the best officer I could be, not the best female officer. And I guarantee you one thing, if I ever thought I was selected for a job or a promotion simply based on being female and not being the best qualified for the job, I would have turned it down in a heartbeat. Things I learned along the way, along my journey, made me a better leader and a better person. But if I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't change a thing. Regardless of your profession or your life's work, I hope this book will assist you in accomplishing whatever it is you set out to do. Much more is set out in the book, but in order to know what those things are, you're going to have to read the book. Or ask me a question right now. Thank you very much. So good to see you. All right. Brave one.
I'm a little nervous, but thank you, General Dunwoody. Appreciate it for your insight, and I look forward to reading your book. But I have a question about power and arrogance and issues that you experience as you made your way through your career. How you deal with people that you need to manage who don't respect you, how to earn their respect. And it's probably in the book, but anything on that you can elaborate on without being or catching the disease yourself, staying grounded as you progress in your career.
Thank you. That's a great question, and I do talk about it in the book because it's something most people experience. In my book, I describe 3 groups of people that I kind of categorize folks that I dealt with in the Army, and that was advocates. That's people who believe in you and support you and advocate for you and they see your worth and your value, and they're advocates throughout your career. There's people I call Janus facers or patronizers. And we all have them. People that are real nice to you to your face and say, hey, what a good job, and then behind the scene, they're back. And the final category is the detractors. And they're just people that don't like you no matter what, and you're not going to make them like you. And some people think, hey, women don't belong in what's this Army come to? You got women here, and you're not going to change your mind, but you might change your mind. And the first thing is to recognize who you're dealing with. And the second thing is to stay on the moral high ground. Don't stoop to backstabbing or name-calling, but deal with them as an individual. Stay on the moral high ground, show that you're professional, and strive to continually leave a higher standard. And what I found is that those who strive to exceed the standard, you gain credibility and support from folks. Because people don't know. Some just haven't had the experience to work with you before. And when I say you, I mean all of us. You're coming to a new organization, people are giving you, I wonder if he's good, or he's bad, or she's good, or she's bad, and you always have to prove yourself. But what I found, staying on the moral high ground, not, the arrogant, there's another section of the book that talks about people that start, believing the OERs that are written about them, how wonderful they are, and there's a phenomenon called hubris. And they all of a sudden think they're above the law. It's not just organic to the military, it's population in general. People start believing they're better than, and they get away with, and those laws don't apply to them. And it's unfortunate, but that happens. And you have to deal with that as well, or talk to those folks. I believe you can't ignore this stuff, and you always should pull people aside when you see this behavior, good, bad, or ugly, because you can't correct yourself if you don't know. And so we all have blind spots. So that's how I try to stay on the moral high ground. Don't get hooked into the bad behavior and start exhibiting yourself.
General, in recent days, it's come out in the news that the military is planning to, or thinking about lowering the standards for the Special Forces, Navy SEALs, things along those lines to make it easier to get more women involved into those sections. Is this something that you would agree with?
Beat your boots. There's no lowering the standards. The guidance was that the services would lift the ban on previously prohibited occupations for women, and that they would have to do their homework and determine what the standards were for those occupations. And there's not standards. We have requirements, but it doesn't necessarily mean those have been studied, and those requirements are the absolute necessary standards for each profession. And so there's a lot of work being done, a lot of studies being done. The last thing we can do, the worst thing we could do, is lower the standards to accommodate what I would then call a social experiment. We're a dangerous profession, and each occupation has requirements, has standards that must be met. Now, I tell people, when I went to airborne school, I was one of the first women going to airborne school, and it wasn't a popular decision. And people didn't like it. I had the black hats yelling at me, and I have the 5-finger tattoos on my behind. But you demonstrated you're capable, and end up being an honor graduate in that class, 4 out of 260-some people. You demonstrate, you show that you can do it. Now, I didn't want to be a ranger. I didn't want to be special forces. I wanted to do my job in peace and war. But there are women today that believe that and want to enter the combat arms, go to ranger school, be in the SEALs. And I believe that if they're capable of doing that without a lowering of the standards, so that can meet the standards and normally exceed the standards, then we should allow them to do that. Because I know, had I not had the opportunity to go to airborne school, I would never had an opportunity to command a parachute rigger detachment. I would never had an opportunity to serve in the 82nd Airborne Division, and I probably wouldn't be standing here today. That badge, that Master Blaster, that allowed me to do things that non-airborne people would not have been able to do. And today, we have 8 women in the Ranger School right now that have qualified. I understand that the attrition rate is about the same as men, but that badge is more about leadership. As jumping out of, these are leadership schools. And if women are capable of doing that, I think they should be allowed. But I do have full faith in in the leadership of the military, that once the analysis, investigation, and the studies are done, that we'll come up with the right answer, whatever that is.
Thank you, General, for your service to America. We're all so incredibly proud of you and your leadership. So having said that, and all the great things that you've done, what's in your future? Where are you going to make a difference next time?
Well, thanks. That's a good question, and I think we always want to continue to try to make a difference in our lives, and the military is a place that the opportunity and privilege of leading soldiers and serving with soldiers. I don't know if I'll ever find something I'm as passionate about in my next life, but I do want to try to make a difference, and I hope through this book that it inspires young, whether in elementary school, thinking about what they want to dream to be, or deciding what their whole life in front of high school is going to be, that this book gives them something to think about, inspires them to dream big and not be dissuaded from whatever it is that they want to do. and that they have the personal courage to pursue that. So I think through the book, I'm trying to reach a different population of folks to share my experiences from the military that worked for me. And as I said, it's not a recipe, it's no secret, it's what worked for me and I hope works for other folks. The other area I'm hopefully trying to make a business is serving on boards, governance of defense companies, non-defense companies, and not-for-profit to share leadership experiences and business experiences from running the organizations I did in the military and how they complement and can be transferred into the civilian world. Thank you for the question.
Good afternoon. When tourists come to Washington, D.C., one of their most visible presence of the United States Army is the tomb guards at the Arlington National Cemetery. These tomb guards are virtually all men. I frankly have never seen a woman as a tomb guard, in spite of the fact we're told that there have been 4 in the past. What answer will you give to an 8th grade girl that says, why aren't there women tomb guards?
Good question. I believe there have been, and I think we've seen picture, and one of the things about the military is the standards. And I'll tell you, when I was in uniform, I wanted to look like a soldier. I didn't want to look like a female soldier. I wanted to look like a soldier. And when I looked at my formations, I saw soldiers. I didn't see black, I didn't see white, I didn't see men, I didn't see women. I saw soldiers because they're held to a standard. And the standard is what you look like. And then the uniform, I'm sure I saw it in, I don't know if it was Army Times, of a strapped female who was wearing the same cap as the men, hair pulled back, pulling guard duty at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. At a time when I entered the Army, we couldn't even have women in the 82nd Chorus. I mean, really? You couldn't be in the band. So the doors, what I have seen, continue to open. And I'll tell those 8th graders, what I witnessed through my journey is that the doors continue to open, from a WAC Corps to 4-star general commanding, now women. And my niece is an A-10 pilot in the Air Force dropping bombs on Afghanistan. The doors continue to open, and I believe that with hard work and compassion and dedication that they can be anything they want to be. I have to share one more story. I have 2 pictures in my office. One's a 6th grader and one's a 5th grader. And they wrote me a letter. They did a book report on me when they had to school. And they sent me a picture of themselves. And one in their ACUs with 4 stars, U.S. Army and Dunwoody, in her black beret. And the other one, ACUs, Dunwoody 4-star, U.S. Army, in her ball cap with 4 stars up there saluting. And I thought, my God, I couldn't even imagine that growing up. I couldn't even ever dream that. And here's these young kids that now know they can be anything they want to be, and things that we can't even imagine in this room, just like I could never have imagined being where I am. Thank you. You're welcome. My friend and hero, Miss Brigadier General Wilma Ball.
And to my friend and hero, did you keep a diary, and was it any help to you when you wrote your book? And do you still go out and run every day?
Good question. I didn't keep a diary, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to do a book on leadership, because I thought I didn't really want to do a memoir, and I really didn't want to do, have one of those big books that people use to hold the doors open. That's just my take on that. I really wanted to talk about the things, and I thought more relevant, that helped me be successful, which is why I spent a lot of time talking about and thinking about what do you want to take away and what do you want to share on leadership with individuals. There's so many. There's thousands of books written on leadership, as I realized as I started on this journey. How do you make it different? And I tried to do is pick those leadership lessons that I thought were most relevant, but also put a human face on with the stories behind those leadership lessons. My first story was about my first time I had to stand in front of an audience as a lieutenant and read an award citation for a battalion commander, and I was first lieutenant. and I was sitting there reading this award, and I started shaking, and I was hanging on to the thing, and it took me forever to get this citation. I didn't think I'd ever get through it. It seemed like 3 hours. It was 3 minutes. But those things happen, but you learn from those things. And this commander, he could have fired me, but he said, hey, that's your first time, you'll get better. Nothing like that ever happened in my life. It just caught me so off guard, but I just thought I was history. But you learn from these things when you have leaders that don't fire you, don't yell at you. They say, you'll get better, you work on that, you practice. And I'll tell you, I never had that happen again, but I always think about it. But there's the human face of leadership is what I try to do, and people think, ooh, generals are revealing. I have tons of stories, tons of mistakes I've made, and tons of things I learned along the way, and we're human. We make mistakes, we learn from our mistakes, and we learn from others, and that's what I try to do. Running every day. I got a new hip for Christmas, so doctor told me no running right away, and if I'm smart, I'll go biking and swimming and treadmill and those other things. So I miss my running right now, so I don't know if I can keep my promise to the doc, but I do something every day. But thanks for your question and your service.
There's no other questions? Thank you.
Thank you. It's great being here. Have a great day. Enjoy this wonderful Washington, D.C. weather.